I'm not sure how much Dave and David talked before I got on, but the background on all this, real quick, is Dave. I met the Nerdarchy guys. I didn't really meet Nate. I think I just said hi to him once, but
Close enough.
Ryan and Dave and Ted, I met them on the fantasy cruise a few weeks ago, and we played some Munchkin one night, played some D&D in a game that Ted ran, and played in another D&D game with Ted. I don't think I played D&D with Dave. You were kind of like the cameraman for the times I was around.
Yeah. Sadly, I did not get to play any D&D while on the cruise.
Oh, you didn't get to play any? Ouch. Okay.
So, well, it just worked out like the time wise. This didn't line up, but it's all right.
Dave was on a working vacation, so
yeah, it seemed like it.
He had his whole family there, whereas the rest of us Nerdarchists, we were there on the solo mission, so it was kind of a different feel. So there were times that Dave was off doing stuff with family, and we were doing other things. So at Nerdarchy, we kind of shift things around as need be. So David actually ran a game for fans at the hotel prior to the cruise for people who were local to the Florida area, and then I'd stepped up and said, well, I'll run while we're there because we know that there were going to be Nerdarchy fans on board, and we made a promise that somebody was going to run a game. So I kind of came prepared to do so. Lucky enough to actually have the eventually game together, which was my first experience with that. So
that was the other thing too. Like we had Nerdarchy fans there, and then Brian. We met you and Brian there. So I would rather give up my seat anyway to have you guys playing the game. And that was still a pretty large game anyway. After a while, it gets a little unwieldy.
Yes,
that was 6 players. So
it was good. I mean, Ted handled it really well. I thought it flowed perfectly. But no, Dave, what I wanted to say, I met these guys because they wanted to interview Brian Stillman. Remember when we interviewed him about Plastic Galaxy?
Oh, that was a fantastic talk. He's awesome.
No, Brian is really good, and so these guys wanted to get him for a couple different pieces about the two, a couple of different projects Brian's working on, and I was kind of like Brian's errand boy because he brought me along on the cruise. So then I started talking to these guys too, and that's why we just started. Hey, we should do something. So that's
hey, wait a minute. Let's call what it was. If you're the plus one, you were Brian's date.
I was.
Well, I would have used the hanger-on term personally because I rarely saw Brian without you, Tim. So
I would totally date Brian for a free cruise. I'm just saying.
I mean, I'm not above that, obviously. So I think somebody I met, I described myself as Brian's beer for the weekend.
Well, hey! What happens on the cruise stays on the cruise. Okay,
that's right.
It's got to be for that wild and crazy hair, right?
Yeah. It is pretty amazing, man. He's just like a wash and go kind of guy too. He doesn't really spend any time styling. It's just all natural. But
TMI.
So, I don't know. I just want to break the ice a little bit and give a little bit of background. But I guess when we get started, Ted and David.
I wanted to ask you about Brian's project, though. I mean, was he still working on that Eye of the Beholder thing, or did that already come out?
No, that's a ways to go still, sir.
Oh, okay.
He said, that 2018 is the likely, which lends me to believe that if things go to pot, that it might not hit till 2019.
Okay.
So
he and his partner Seth, they traveled around quite a bit last year, and they interviewed a lot of artists. And then I got to meet up with them once in the fall. They came back to Lake Geneva to just shoot some B-roll and to do 1 or 2 interviews. And since I don't live too far from there, I just shot up there for a couple of days. I think it was back in August or September, and just like spent the days with them on a Saturday and a Sunday, just kind of hanging out and helping them. And like Jeff Easley was there, and another guy, and it was pretty casual. So that was cool. I got to know them a little better because of that. And then, he's been keeping everybody updated. He does a good job of promoting his stuff, but he's just like he was telling. There's a cool interview that the Nerdarchy guys did with Brian. That's on YouTube, where he talks about a lot of cool stories he's picked up, and you could tell he loves working on this. And I'm sure if he could work on it forever, he probably would, because he would just have more excuses to just keep meeting with these guys and learning all this stuff.
Yeah, I was geeking out when he was telling us all about the Star Wars action figures, and like even the Boba Fett that shot the missile.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, oh, that's so awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember collecting the Star Wars toys as well. So I mean, I went into some of my own personal stories, and I do have. It's probably nowhere near as valuable as the stuff that he's got, but I've got one of the more rare that was widely released, but Amana Man. He was like one of the top few that was hard to come by because there was only so many released, and I went through my own story to try and get one of my own. So I mean, I shared that in the story with him, and like he knew, like, oh yeah, of course, that's this and that's this, and he knows more about it than I do, so it's cool.
Very, very cool to have an encyclopedic knowledge of something you're passionate about.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, so tonight we're gonna get into 80's TV shows and movies, huh?
Actually, I thought the topic was 80's fantasy and sci-fi movies. Was that not it? Or did I have?
Yeah, that's what we were thinking. We could do TV too, but I just figured fantasy was the main thing, right?
Okay.
Because of Nerdarchy being so heavily into D&D, and we've done a couple podcasts about gaming and stuff.
Well, I got a handful of titles picked out with their years and whatnot. Now, if you don't want to go into TV, I can scratch 2 of these off my list and still have 4 topics, 3 topics and an honorary mention that might prompt you guys into stuff.
Oh, then that'd be perfect then. Yeah, if we want to stick with movies, that'd be fantastic because that's what I'm ready for.
All right. I got a list of 8, so I don't know what kind of preparation people made or are supposed to make, but I'm going to warn you now. The late 80s, early 90s were a bit rough, so my memory isn't that great.
I'll throw out a disclaimer. I was born in '78, so by the time the 80s were over, I was 12, 13.
All right, so you're a lot younger then, because I'm 46. I was born in '71, so I grew up in the '80s. So all these movies like Conan and all that stuff, and those were right when I was learning D&D, and it was all dovetailing beautifully for me.
Right.
Yeah, I was born in '75. I'm 41.
So
okay, you guys are pups.
Group. Yep, born in '70.
So Dave's the weak leg, as he doesn't rewatch things. Whereas I, on the other hand, I literally watched one of these movies every day for an entire summer. So,
yeah, you ever see Toy Story when they're flipping through the channels, and he's like, "Go back," and he's like, "No, I can't go back."
Yeah, you gotta go around the horn.
That's fate. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Gotta go around the horn. It's faster that way. All right. Well then, I guess if we have our picks ready, then we could probably just jump in.
Sword of Omens, give me sight beyond sight.
Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Star League to defend the frontier against Sur and the Kodan Armada. Get ready. Prepare for blast-off.
Hey, Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88. Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Remember, no matter where you go, there you are.
This is 80's Reboot Overdrive Podcast.
We were dancing just like Swayze when Jennifer Grey had nose. Oh, how I miss the 80s, but I'm too young to really know. Too young to know.
Oh my god. That is so dated.
Hello, this is 80's Reboot Overdrive, and I am Dave. Online, I have got a voice from 80's Reboot Past, but you must have listened to him on 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse, and that's co-host Tim. Glad to talk to you again, Tim.
Yeah, it's been a while. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. We got something cool planned here for this one.
Yeah, we, Tim decided that he just wanted to talk music with Scott, and he totally ditched me, on the curb, and he's like, I don't want to talk 80s anymore with movies and TV. It's just hard rock and heavy metal and devil music. So, he went his own way, and I cry in my pillow every night. But anyway,
that is all true.
But we've also got some special guests online with us, and they're joining us from the very cool YouTube channel Nerdarchy. We have Dave and Ted. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is going to be a blast. I know that you guys are predominantly into the D&D stuff, and I know that is just an even great 80s topic. But what we decided to do was we're going to be talking about our favorite 1980s fantasy/sci-fi movies. So each one of these co-hosts that are on, we're going to be talking through our top 3 or maybe just 3 movies that we want to talk about, and any kind of honorable mentions that come up along the way. The format we normally do is, we'll go and bring up our first one that we want to talk about, and then everybody gets to comment, and then we go around round robin until we all have 3 turns.
Awesome.
So, you guys good? Ready to go?
Indeed.
Let's do this.
Hey, I have a 4-sided die ready. So, who wants to be number 1?
Oh wow! Okay, we're gonna blend worlds here. Awesome.
All right, so number 1 should be Dave, who this is his show. He's got to be the guy. He's got to be the one. Right?
Okay, so 80s reboot. 80s reboot. Dave is 1. Then I guess I would be 2.
For co-host, you can go for 2.
Yeah. So
in the Nerdarchy hierarchy, I would put Nerdarchy is Dave is number 3, and that leaves me with 4.
All right, so here we go. I roll a 1. So in a game, that would suck, but in terms of a podcast, no big deal. So 80s Dave.
Oh, so I get to go first. I love it. I was probably going more sci-fi with my picks. I hope that's fine with you guys. But if you ever listen to the intro to the podcast, there is a soundbite from one of my favorite 80s movies of all times. And the soundbite is, no matter where you go, there you are. And I'm talking Buckaroo Banzai.
I am very familiar with that quote. Not as familiar with that particular movie.
Oh, okay. All right. And the thing is, it's I know that a lot of people, it wasn't commercially popular as a lot of the other movies, because Buckaroo had this thing where you kind of jumped right into this universe where these characters existed, and you didn't get an origin story too much. You really didn't get a big setup. So you just had to kind of jump right into this world where there's this guy that's a brain surgeon, and he's a samurai and a scientist and all these other great things, and a rock and roll. He's got a rock and roll band. All these things that are just combined into the great actor that is Peter Weller. And culminating into just this fantastic sci-fi movie that had, Dr. or Lord John Worfen, Monkey Boy. It was just absolutely fantastic. It was a lot of fun in that movie. If you got past the premise of, I didn't get a lot of the build-up background that I normally would with traditional movies.
Well, I would say that that typically there isn't a lot of build-up in the older movies. You either took it what they gave you and ran with it, or you're like, I'm not really into this because you don't understand. I think the more build-up and background and setup is more of a new age type situation. Am I wrong?
I prefer movies that jump right into it and don't bog it down with a bunch of stuff that may not be relevant to the viewer. They become these like just this dumping ground of information that tends to get lost. Like the really good movies, if they're gonna give you the backstory and background, they do it throughout the best. Like a modern example would be the Deadpool movie, how he goes through the backstory, how it stays congruent with whatever is going on now.
Yeah,
I mean, it can't be.
If you look at a movie like 1989's Batman, I mean, you had the setup. You had the backstory of why Bruce Wayne was Batman. You had him as a kid and he lost his parents, and you had that kind of storyline.
But it was a rush job. You didn't know the character. You knew like one signature event that foretold who he is to become. That's my take on it anyway.
Who the hell doesn't know how Batman came about anyway? Even if you're not, you could like never read a Batman comic book in your life and be oblivious to comic books in general and still know why Batman's Batman.
Yeah, that's kind of true. You kind of got to agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, but you didn't get that with Buckaroo, though. You didn't know. I mean,
right?
This guy just. I mean, you jumped right in at the beginning. He was doing the brain surgery, and then next thing you know, he's driving through a mountain. You didn't really get a setup as to, why the Hong Kong Cavaliers were there, and how he became, this guy that was just so well versed in all of these disciplines. So that's kind of what I was getting at. Was you really didn't get that kind of setup. But I thought it was cool for that respect of it, though.
Was it like, I haven't seen this movie in so long, I barely remember it, but that was kind of part of the joke, though, too, right? It was just kind of comically over the top that he does this, and he does that, and he does that, too. Wasn't that part of the vibe?
Yeah. I mean, it was, you just kind of had to suspend the beliefs of, this common, ordinary man. And, this guy was just great at, jokingly, everything he touched, everything he did. Think of every Tom Cruise movie where he's the best of every single thing he touches. He's the best bartender, or he's the best race car driver. And yes, I pick on Tom Cruise a lot on this podcast. But put that all into one movie, and that's
one character.
Yeah,
right.
That's one character, right?
The ultimate Mary Sue. I have a confession. I was 9 when that movie came out, so it's been a long time since I've seen it. I'm fairly certain I've seen it. Now I want to go back and watch it again, just because that's far enough back. And like I was telling you guys before we even started, late 80s, early 90s were a little rough. I don't rewatch a lot of movies. I won't reread books, stuff like that. I kind of just like go straight and go for it. But yeah, I think I'm going to go back and check that one out, though, now.
I would definitely recommend.
Because I had, like, some memories flashing through my head, and I'm like, I don't think any of these have anything to do with that movie now. Now I'm listening to you talk.
Well, like I said, I know that quote, and that quote's been used over and over again, but I personally, I don't think I've ever seen it. If I did, it was in one ear and out the other.
I think I'm thinking of a completely different movie. So I'm thinking Cowboys in Space and a black actor.
Are you thinking Ice Pirates?
No, I don't think that's it. But that's
you're thinking of Wild Wild West, right? The more recent one.
No. This would be going back a ways.
Oh, okay.
But it was definitely basically it was a Western in space kind of themed. And after I listened to you talk, I'm like, well, that's not it at all. Now I have to go back and watch Buckaroo Banzai and then figure out what I'm actually thinking about.
Yeah, because I mean, there was one person that was dressed like a cowboy for just a short while, but it wasn't very long. Well, there was a guy named Rawhide too, so maybe that I don't know.
It's a mystery, Scooby-Doo.
It is. Yeah. All right, so who goes next? Are we going in order of what we do we roll again? Is that the way it works?
Yeah. Here we go. Ready? I got a 3. So Nerdarchy Ted.
Oh, no, that was Nerdarchy Dave.
Nerdarchy Dave.
Or are we bumping
you're
out?
Right. No. You're right. It's Nerdarchy Dave.
All right, so I kind of got a little crazy here, right? And I just went freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Because if you're talking sci-fi fantasy in the 80s, you can go, there's, I found like 6 movies, and I'm like trying to remember which ones actually fell in place. But I'm gonna go with I'll go with Conan the Barbarian, 82.
So I actually had this one on my list as well, because he had 82 for Barbarian and 84 for Destroyer. So that's a quick 1-2 punch.
Yeah, and at this point in my mind, I've probably blended the movies together. But it is it's the most like iconic fantasy character to probably ever exist.
I don't have any argument to that case. What do you guys think?
No, you can't argue that. I mean, it's funny though, because I just, for purposes of research purposes only, educational, academic purposes, I watched it again just a couple of days ago. And, you remember hearing so much about how there was so little dialogue in this movie, that Arnold only had a couple of lines or whatever, and that they tried to, set everything, the tone with the music and all that, and which is true. However, he actually had a lot more lines in it than I remembered. Conan spoke a lot more, and it was, when he did speak, he was actually fairly eloquent and intelligent and philosophical. It wasn't just like, ooh, Crom, destroy. He actually had some nice dialogue that kind of surprised me. I didn't really remember that.
Well, I got to touch on one thing you said, and that's the music. And honestly, the music is a much bigger part of my world from Conan the Barbarian than the actual movie. And this relates to what Nerdarchy Dave and I have as our passion, and that's D&D. And before we became Nerdarchy and filmed all of our games, we frequently used the soundtrack to Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer as ambiance music for the game. And I don't remember exactly what track, but the song or music Anvil of Crom, for at least a decade, that was our battle music. Every time combat was going to start, put on track, whatever. And
yeah, we didn't change out the music until Gladiator came out.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
It stood the test of time.
Oh, it's a classic. When I would DM our group back in college decades ago, that if we had music on in the background, it was either the Conan soundtrack or maybe some Manowar. But yeah, we used the Conan soundtrack quite a bit too. It's perfect. I mean, it's just perfect.
Yeah, props for the Manowar mention. I still listen to that when I work out sometimes.
I do too.
If I'm not listening to Body Count or something, there's a good chance that it's Manowar.
You use a phrase that I think I should know. Work out. What does that mean? All right, no, go ahead, please.
It doesn't happen nearly as often as it should, but gotta try.
No, I also like in this movie how it stays true to. I haven't read all the bajillion Conan novels, but I've read enough that you get a sense for how the world is laid out and how magic is rare and it's weird and it's dark and it's mysterious, and it's really cool how they certainly portrayed it that way in the movie too. You just know that like anybody aside from the wizard who helps Conan, like everybody else who's even remotely touched by magic is just evil. You just know that.
And that particular philosophy, is something that I think many have tried to correlate into, other books, movies, or into the tabletop role playing hobby. And people are just like, all right, well, I want to use magic too, but if magic's bad, so it's I love the feel of it, but I think people kind of rebel against that. Magic just can't be evil.
Well, it's just so gritty. Like literally, it's like they took Boris Valero and put that, on the big screen. That's when I look at the Conan movies, especially the first one. The first one was really well done and kind of goes downhill from there. But we recently just D&Dized Conan, and we're like, well, which Conan do you do? Because like you said, comics, video games, novels. But, for us, like the most iconic is obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Conan movies.
Yeah, I think you're a certain age, that's what you think of first, even though Conan, the property's been around forever. But yeah, I think many people immediately think of Arnold.
Yeah, Conan has actually been around so long that he's not under copyright anymore.
Is it public domain now?
It is, and in fact, within the last several years, they've actually made a super huge board game on Kickstarter by Monolith, and that did over $3 million on Kickstarter. I've got way too much plastic in my basement from that game. They also, like a year later, they did the Conan RPG that kind of linked to the board game as well. If you actually back that on Kickstarter, it would you actually got stuff for the board game that you only get through the Kickstarter. So it was really interesting to see what some of these guys were reporting on, and how much they've been influenced by this movie from 30 plus years ago. And then at the same time, it's like, all right, it's even further back because the novels have been around even longer. So.
Well, I think back in the, if you like, don't look at the property of Conan itself, but just look at the box office that was happening back in the 80s. You also had that rivalry between Stallone and Schwarzenegger happening. And this just really fed into it. I mean, it was solidifying that battle. You had Conan come out, and then you'd be having Rambo, and then then a Rocky movie, and
you have Rambo and Rocky, and
the Predator, and it was like, my God, these guys just killing each other. It's awesome. So it was a great time to be watching movies and digging things like Conan.
Yeah, although we didn't get very many sci-fi fantasy movies from Stallone.
Yeah, you're right.
His primary action. I mean, there's definitely some Judge Dredd and
Demolition Man.
Demolition
Man.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he pretty much stayed away from it. All right, I'm gonna roll again.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a 2. That's me. I'm gonna stick with the same year, 1982, but I'm gonna go PG. I'm gonna go with Beastmaster.
That was on my list as well. I love me the Beastmaster. I dug it in all its iterations, all the movies, the TV show. I was a big fan.
Wow. Okay, so you're admitting that you like the sequels, the sequel films?
Absolutely. Yep.
Wow. See, I can't do that.
I don't even remember the sequel films.
Well, there were a couple.
That's it.
I remember this, because the first one, 82, right? I was 11 years old when it came out. I saw it a million times on HBO, like everybody else who was that age. And then when the sequel, I don't even remember. I was in college. We learned there was a sequel. We're like, ooh, another Beastmaster movie, because we all still play D&D and everything. And I remember we went and rented the VHS from whatever video store was in DeKalb, Illinois, and we all, whatever, we all sat around and watched it. And it's just, oh my God, it was just so different and silly, and it was like, oh no. And then that turned me off to like everything else. If they did other sequels, the TV show, I'm like, no, they screwed up one of my favorite movies. I can't do it.
I have the box set of the DVDs for the Beastmaster TV show. I enjoyed it. Sorry.
So was the show goofy like the sequel films, or was it a little more like the original movie?
It was all fantasy. There wasn't any modern day, him coming to our world or any of that kind of stuff.
Good.
I love the Beastmaster. I love the fact that he had these connections with animals, and he got to use them to solve the problems. And whatever the issue, here's this guy that can do the stuff. And I like I said, to me as a kid, I mean, '82. I'm 4 or 5 years old, so I'm not like I watched this years after it had come out.
So now that you bring it up and I'm thinking about it, do you guys think R.A. Salvatore ripped off Beastmaster for Dritz?
Maybe he paid homage. No, it's a good point. I mean, you got a big black cat running around. You never know. But actually, I never really thought about that. But now you got me thinking. I wonder.
I never thought about it too until we just started talking and brought up Beastmaster, and I'm like, yeah, that Black Panther. And I was like, wait a minute, who else has a Black Panther?
What's so cool with me being getting into D&D around this time too, and my favorite character was always a ranger, so I thought Dar perfectly was a ranger, and just having the animals and the final fight in that movie against the evil Jun Horde, and their leader with that crazy helmet with the big giant wings, and he had that comically large mace weapon that got stuck in his own back, and he kept trying to pull it out of his back so he could still use it. But that fight with all the fire and everything, that was so cool. And I watched that again recently too, and I was showing my daughter, I'm like, you see that? None of that CGI. That's real. Those guys are in the middle of fire beating the hell out of each other. That's real. That's classic movie making.
Yeah, that's real fire there. Someone could get burnt. Someone probably did.
All right, so Beastmaster trivia. Name the ferrets.
Oh, jeez.
Kodo and Podo. Come on,
man. Awesome. And, of course, who can forget the fabulous Tanya Roberts?
Mm.
Yes.
Yes.
That comes from no slave girl.
and the thing
Telling you, man, it's one of my favorite movies.
And I don't know why, but I just always remember the ring with the eye.
That was awesome.
Yeah. It was so creepy. I remember it being so creepy and disgusting when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden
well,
he
this
had
is
that,
another
like, the poker or something like that, where he like poked the eye, and then all of a sudden it got the guy that was watching. Yeah, it was like freaky.
Yeah, it was one of the witches. Yeah. It was one of the witches. That's how they were scrying on the good guys. And then when they finally realized they were being watched, he put it out with the, I don't remember, poker or stick or whatever. But then the witch's eye,
it was
exploded.
The stick from the fire. He pulled it out of the fire. The thing was like hot embers. Yeah.
But even that's another one, like Conan, the magic was all, evil and dark in that movie too. That's how he got his powers, because they magically pulled him out of his mother's womb and put him in a cow. So that, I guess, is why he was attuned with animals, right? And it's funny, for being the Beastmaster, right, and he's empathetic with animals and whatever, there's a lot of animal death and violence in that movie too, which is kind of funny, because you'd think it would be like, pro animals, but there's a lot of animals meet their end in that movie.
Well, sometimes that needs to happen. And they weren't afraid to do that in the 80s. There was no, PETA stamping all over everything.
Yeah, it's so true. And it violate. One of the things I hate about movies is when the dog dies. And spoiler alert, that happens in this movie, and I still love it. So that's how awesome this movie is.
Well, I'm still trying to get over Artax from Neverending Story dying, so.
Wow.
I haven't gotten over that yet.
Some wounds run too deep.
The horse, sometimes it just doesn't make it.
Yep. I'll be okay. I need a moment. No. Okay. All right. So, Ted's next.
All right. Well, I have to leap to one of my all-time favorite movies, and up until the current Marvel Cinematic Universe iteration started, the favorite movie of mine, and that's 1987 Princess Bride. This is the movie that, as I said earlier, I watched every day, honestly, for an entire summer. I just threw it on. I loved it. I can recite every line along with the movie. Can't do it, without the movie there. I'll falter it at many points, but I got nothing wrong with this movie. I love every single one of the main actors. They do a fantastic job. The fight scenes are spectacular. The pace is strong throughout. Like I said, I can't say enough good things about Princess Bride.
And this movie is so quotable, like, throughout the years. I cannot tell you how many times that I've said, "Have fun storming the castle." It just works, and people know it, and it's like,
you didn't
prepare to die, my name is what was it, Montoya?
My name is Diego Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Right. I mean,
actually,
you get, it's inconceivable.
Yep. That was gonna be my go-to.
In the D&D circles that we travel, it is probably the second most quoted thing.
And then what's the
behind
first?
Monty Python?
Monty Python, clearly.
Yeah, I think you're right. I would say that too with my groups that I've played in over the years. I hadn't really thought about that again until right now, but you're absolutely right about that. And it's cool because it's quotable and it's not forced. Sometimes you can tell when a movie's trying to push a catchphrase on you, and this is not like that. It's just, I love this. My wife actually hates this movie, and I'm like, how can you not like this movie?
I would love to get in a conversation with anyone that can find something wrong with, let alone says that they don't like.
Well, if Tim ever gets divorced, then he can end with, and finally, Your Honor, she hates Princess Bride.
And then I'll get everything right there. I'll just be awarded everything.
That's it. Come on, we got the acting sensational chops of Andre the freaking Giant and Fred Savage.
Oh no!
Wow,
that's true.
In Columbo.
You got Columbo.
You got Columbo in there, so he's good to go.
I love Christopher Guest as the six-fingered man too. Just that scene where he just runs away is just awesome.
I don't know, Mandy Patinkin. Come on, his arc is awesome. He's a good guy, bad guy, good guy.
Now the fight scene where he finally gets a showdown with the Black Pirate, I am not left-handed. I have a secret. I'm not left-handed either. That is brilliant.
That is my all-time favorite fight scene in any movie, and like those guys worked really hard to be able to do the kind of stuff that they did, and like in the
no way, Ted, that stuff was all CGI'd.
and what is actually even more interesting is when they were actually doing that fight scene, they took it from the book where their dialogue is more mental in the actual book, but the things that they're quoting are actual fencing fighting styles and is apropos to what it is that they're doing. So like it's that much more layered, which to me, when I got intelligent enough to fully comprehend what it was that they were doing, I did more research on the movie, and I was just further blown away and further more in love with the movie because of course Tybalt cancels out Capofaro. So like, yeah,
clearly.
And what's great is just all you gotta do is quote a couple of those lines, and everybody starts laughing. And that's what that movie did for us. It was just fantastic throughout, and I agree with you. I mean, I don't see a bad thing in this movie.
And as you said, that you laugh because there is so much greatness about that movie. I don't know about the rest of you, but when you say a line, my brain goes right to where that happens in the movie and what's going on, and then you watch a little bit in your head. I've seen it so many times. That's what happens with me. So that's what I do.
Well, I don't know, but I've developed a immunity to iocane powder. But all right, so then how do we do our next round? Do we roll again, or do we go in the same order that we established on the first round?
We'll keep the initiative. So Dave, 80s Dave, it's back to you.
Back to me. Keep the initiative. Wow. Okay. It's been a long time since I played D&D, so you gotta bear with me.
Tim will guide you.
Okay, very good. So he's our DM tonight.
Looks that way.
All right. Which choice am I going to go with? I'm looking at 3 of them. I'm trying to decide which one to go with. Let's go Flash Gordon.
Nice.
Yes. Flash. Oh. Yeah, just this it was just ultimate cheesy, but cheesy in a great early 80s way.
If for no other reason, the friggin' music alone
Queen.
makes that
Yes.
puts it on the list. Oh, it was so epic.
Yes.
The power ballads that play throughout the whole entire movie is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that was something that 80s movies did. They'd have no problem saying, okay, well, we're going to have an action sequence or a training sequence or something else that's going on, and we're just going to have a music track cover this clip sequence.
Well,
So.
I mean, the thing that I don't think it happened in Flash Gordon, but the 80s was great for the montage scenes, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, they just threw that music right in the background of whatever action was happening, and they were talking over it. I mean, there's the epic scene where Flash is going down with the spaceship, and at the end, eventually ends up going into Ming. But, I mean, you've got the Queen song in the background, and you just got him yelling, "Tell Dell, I know it would have been great." It's cheesy. Just cheesy, wonderful stuff. I loved Voltan, the Hawkman. Just the part where they had to do the battle between him and Baron, where they had to stick their hand into the tree, and
with the poison thing in there.
so many great scenes in it, and they played into the cheesiness just so ultimately well. And there are scenes where I admit is not great acting, and I think of like the scientist a lot, where I forgot his name. But
Dr. Zarkov.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Zarkov. I didn't think that, his scenes where he was, awesome, but just, it all it blended together and worked really well.
And defeating.
And just to have a scene where he's like fighting all these guys off by playing football in Ming's chamber. I mean, it's cheesy, but it worked. It just worked, and it was just fun.
That's absolutely what I was going to say. Defeating your enemies through football.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's funny. There's an alternate universe Nerdarchy Dave that does cosplay, and I kind of bring this up because I met Tim on this Comic-Con fantasy cruise, and I had considered doing some cosplays, right? And I don't want to shave my beard, and I'm like, Voltan, was it Voltar, the Baron?
Yeah, Voltan was the Hawkman.
Yeah, he was on my list. I was like, that's definitely one I would cosplay.
You could have done that. That would have been sweet.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm working on this sweet deal with Ted, where we're cosplay partners, right? Where he makes the costumes and I just wear them.
That's a good deal.
That's a good deal for somebody. And
I would pursue that.
And when he says I make them, it's more like I assist my wife who has the knowledge of a seamstress.
Look, dude, I don't care how it happens. Just make it so.
Just make it so. And I think Dave, that totally would have worked because, imagine just having those epic wings, it would have been awesome. You got to do it.
I'm glad you brought this movie up because actually I watched this last night as kind of like a dark horse because I figured we'd all clobber each other and pick the same things, and this was going to be my dark horse pick. And I forgot how much I really liked this movie. I mean, it's cheesy, but it's on purpose. I mean, they weren't trying to make a sci-fi epic. It was I was reading up on it too, and it's definitely like a 1930s comic strip brought to life, and it was cool too watching it with my daughter, and she commented on how the costuming was so cool, even though the wings were cheesy and all that, but the colors, everything was really vibrant and cool, and it's so true that the Hawkman's wings look goofy, but Baron's in his arboreal guys all in their greens, and the bad guys, there was that Darth Vader guy, General Clytus.
Yeah.
The secret police kind of look like Dr. Doom and Darth Vader kind of crossed together, and then Ming with Max von, how do you say his last name? Is it Sydow or Sido? I don't know how you pronounce it, but he always looked awesome as Ming. And then don't forget the awesome pillow fight between Dale Arden and Ming's daughter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah, especially when that came out. Oh my god. or when I was watching that on would have been HBO Homebox back in the day.
I think that's where I first saw it. It had to have been on HBO when I was 11 years old or something. It had to have been it.
Yeah, you got the whole da-na-na music trailer going, before you watch.
Then also too, more recent though, but kind of like paying homage to the Flash Gordon movie, is the Ted movies where they had the actor that played Flash Gordon in there, and what is that, Sam Jones?
Yeah, Sam
Yep,
Jones.
Sam Jones.
And that was pretty hilarious.
I gotta tell you, the day that Sam Jones followed 80's Reboot on Twitter was like a big day for me. I was like, Flash Gordon is following me. This is awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So,
but back to the cosplay, Dave. If you do ever dress up like Voltan, you have to just speak in a completely over-the-top, loud manner and just laugh like there's no tomorrow, like he does. You have to do that.
I'll have to study up. Yeah, in my mind, I had a different cosplay for each day of the cruise. Gimli and maybe like a Savage Aquaman or a Maestro from the Hulk.
Nice.
Oh, epic
you know what?
ideas.
I just thought of another Manowar tie-in. The actor who played Voltan, Brian Blessed. He when Manowar re-recorded some stuff, he provided the narration on the new version of the stuff that was originally done by another voice actor back in the day. So he's actually got ties into Manowar.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
It's all about Manowar.
All right, so now we're on Nerdarchy Dave's choice.
All right, so I'm going to come off of Schwarzenegger here and go to I want to go to Dark Crystal from 1982. Like I remember seeing that movie in the movie theater, and like it had some I would have been kind of young, and it had some like scary parts in it. Recently we picked up some new family members, a couple of chinchillas, and originally it was only supposed to be one chinchilla, and my family went to pick it up and they already had the name picked out. So when they went and picked up Fizzgig, then they ended up also the brother, which is Sully. I'm like, so I'm like, Sully, Fizzgig, that doesn't even work. But that was really impactful for me at the time. The Dark Crystal, the stuff Jim Henson was doing was friggin' amazing. And as far as like fantasy and the puppetry, that one sticks out in my memory.
Yeah,
that's an awesome pick.
Yeah, I love the use of the puppets, as like a live action movie. It's just so well done, and anything Henson touched, in that time era, he was a god.
And when you get into like the special effects, compare, from back then to now, I remember watching like the behind the scenes stuff, and those giant rabbit things that they would ride. And when you realize that it's a guy on, two pairs of stilts in order to make that happen, it's crazy.
All right, I'm gonna let this out there. Dark Crystal again was another 1982 movie. I was terrified of the Skeksis when I was a kid. Now, mind you, again, this came out when I was 4 or 5 years old. It took a long time for me to not be frightened by that movie.
Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. Like visually, it was so astonishing, and and I know like one of the scenes that would have had to been terrifying would have been when they're all at the long table eating, and there's like these things crawling all over the table, and they got those knives that fit over top of their fingers that they would spear the food with.
With this movie, I was 12. My mom took my friends and me to see it for my birthday that January of '83, right after it came out, and I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say it was a kid's movie, but even as a 12-year-old, it was still, again, just getting into D&D, just loved that movie. And what's really even doubly and trebly cool about it is it's all original. It's not based off of or adapted from some other source. That was all them. It was 100% pure creativity. And it was so cool. And watching that again recently too, pointing out to my kid how that scene where the Gelflings first meet and Jen meets Fizzgig, and I'm like that's all manufactured. That whole forest scene, that's all made. It's just so much. I don't know, TLC those guys put into that movie.
Well, yeah. What about the Constellation Room? Like,
yeah, yeah, Agra and her. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
And the hermit crabs from hell.
Well, I like the line that it's kind of stood out. It's like, well, of course you don't have wings. You're a boy.
Oh yeah, when she unveiled her wings, I mean, come on, who wasn't floored by that? Like,
Yeah.
That's awesome. When that, come on. And the little pod people, the guys that just look like little stone little Muppets.
What was it? Olga? Was that the name of the witch? The with the constellations?
It was something. I think it was Agra or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Just like, and when she pulls out her eye again with the eyes from the 80s movies. That stuff is so freaky. I was saying it as a little kid.
That's awesome that you guys have a chinchilla named Fizzgig, because like 15 years ago, we got a gray long-haired cat, and my wife and I were struggling forever to come up with the name, and then all of a sudden it occurred to me, like, Fizzgig. She's like, yes, it was immediate, and so it's pretty cool to know that there's other Fizzgigs running around out there.
My wife had a cat named Fizzgig well before we were together.
Well, for the chinchilla, it's really appropriate because these things are psychotic. It's funny, like, so we had the pair of them, and we have this multi-tier cage that's got 3 levels to it, and one of them would be like going up one of the ramps, and the other one's at the bottom or the top, and their paws are like little hands, grabbing the ramp from either side, trying to flip it while the other one's on it. So these things, they're
devious.
They are.
All right, so I think we're on Tim's pick.
I'm going to go another early 80s one. I'm going to go with Dragon Slayer from 1981. This is one that I don't know if a lot of people remember this movie, but it always stuck with me. It was another HBO. I think I watched a lot of HBO when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and I was spending a lot of time at my grandparents' house getting babysat, and HBO was there. So that's where
I've
learned all this stuff.
I've seen the imagery of their their logo shot many times, but again, this is another one of them that's old enough that it just missed me.
I wasn't going to mention this one as a pick, but if it didn't get mentioned, I was going to give it an honorable mention because, again, same as you, HBO Homebox, right? It's where I got to see boobs for the first time, pretty much.
Yes.
And there's a handful of movies: Sword and Sorcery, Excalibur, Dragon Slayer. All of them were like. Apparently, my parents did a horrible job of monitoring what I watched. But these are all the places where I got to see boobs for the first time. Very memorable.
It's true, and well, with this movie,
I don't remember boobs being into Dragon Slayer. Was it in this?
Yeah,
one?
when he discovers that she's a girl because she masquerades as a boy, so she doesn't get picked to be. Finally, someone said a movie I can remember well. But no, she masquerades as a boy to not be chosen.
Right, for the lottery or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, and actually I just watched this maybe 2-3 weeks ago because we were going to do we were doing a podcast topic around 80s Disney movies. This is actually a Disney movie, and I wanted to find something that was a little obscure that I haven't seen before, just as research. And I was going on demand, and I came across this one, and I was like, "Well, I haven't seen it before." And back in the 80s, I was a fan of fantasy type things, so gave it a whirl, And I gotta say though, I think if I would have seen it in the 80s, I would have had more respect for it. But looking at it from a 2017 perspective and seeing it for the first time, it didn't do much for me.
I liked it a lot. Well, just because the hero was so atypical for these movies. He wasn't some big buff guy. He was this little squirrely little apprentice.
Right.
And I love that, he got the special weapon to go and defeat the dragon. Well, guess what? It didn't work. The dragon was too much of a badass, and like they had to resort to trickery and magic to kill the thing because it was so tough. And the sequence where he goes in to the dragon's lair and there's the flaming underground lake and he's jumping from spot to spot and he's looking around and the dragon rears its head from behind him coming out of the water. That is the coolest scene. Like if you could somehow get Dar the Beastmaster into that dragon's cave and have him wielding the three-bladed sly sword from the Sword and the Sorcerer, that would be the ultimate movie moment of my entire life. Because that's the way that scene is staged in the Dragon's Cavern is so cool, and the dragon's tough. It's portrayed like a dragon should be.
Right, I can't. Well, let's contact Mark Singer and see if we can set that up.
I can't let it slide if we don't at least mention the shield. Where she the female character goes and collects the dragon scales to make the shield, and it's like the only thing to protect them from the flames.
That was a really smart idea, though. Yeah.
It was cool. I mean, you got to have your magic weapons or whatever to defeat something like that, and it was done in a realistic way. When the dragon arises and burns down the priest, and the guy just crumples over. That it's gruesome but funny, and it's actually cool because that guy is Ian McDiarmid, the Emperor from the Star Wars movies.
Yeah. The other thing I found kind of memorable about that movie. Now, again, like I haven't watched this movie in decades, but like the one princess rigging the lottery, because it had been rigged for her, and so in protest, she sacrifices herself to the dragon in the lottery.
Right, because she put her name in, for everyone else, had her name put in it. Yeah.
It was gruesome too, because that was only rated PG. And you remember what happened to her? I don't know. What the baby dragons were chowing on her corpse, and it was pretty grisly for a PG movie.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, they didn't have the set guidelines, back then. Now you mention a curse word, and it's like, oh, that's automatically, PG-13. There's the line in Spaceballs, F. Even in the future, nothing works. But they said the full line, and I'm like, kids back then were like, did he just say that? But they get away with it a lot in that movie.
Yeah, I think what I didn't like about it maybe is just because he was a little whiny, and a little like you mentioned, just kind of what you would expect, not expect from the main, hero, that we got in the 80s. And just because, he had that whininess about him and kind of the, hey, I can be cool too, and I can do all these really things, trust me. I don't know, I had moments of, a young Anakin Skywalker going on, and I just couldn't get past it.
That's harsh.
Well, fortunately for me, I haven't seen the movie in decades, so I will just cling to the fondness of my memories.
Yeah, and like I said, if I would have seen it back then, I probably would have been okay with revisiting it, and it would have been like a fond memory. But having seen it for the first time, just this year, I don't think it worked for me.
Fine.
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 We're allowed to have negative opinions about movies on this thing. I mean, that's the way we roll. I mean, obviously I spend a lot of time harshing Tom Cruise's gig, so. But that's deserved. But I guess we go on to Ted's pick.
All right.
And you just ruined it. He was going to pick Legend with Tom Cruise, and now he's scrambling.
No, Legend did not make my list.
Oh, that was a good one. That would be a good one.
What did make
that
my
would be
list?
a good follow-up to my comments. So,
What did make my list, however, I have positive recollections of this movie, although the base plot I don't remember. So we'll see how many of you guys remember from 1983 Krull.
They had to climb a mountain or something. I'm pretty sure that was definitely in there.
I remember his magic throwing star, and that he could guide it with his hand. And as Tim was mentioning about D&D and how it it influenced kind of things, and that the Magic Sword and Dragon Slayer, this was another one that you had that thing, and without this destined weapon or this magic thing, you wouldn't be dealing with any of this. So I have fond memories of the movie without actually being able to remember what the overarching plot was.
Didn't he have a Cyclops companion in that movie?
Yes, the noble Cyclops.
Well, because you always have to have a noble Cyclops, don't you?
Yeah. Who doesn't want one?
Now I have to tap out because now you've expanded all of my knowledge of that movie.
That was one that I remember liking as a kid, thinking it was great, and then revisiting it as a teenager, maybe 20 years old, and thinking, "Ooh, I don't know. It's slow, you know. It's."
I imagine if I go back and watch, a lot of these movies, they're not gonna hold up. I can tell you for a fact that many of the things that I adored as a child, I've tried to share with my son television wise, and it's painful. I've watched, watching the old Voltron, watching the old, Transformers, and it's just like, oh my God, how did these scriptwriters have a job? Let alone have 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 seasons.
As long as the toy was selling, then that's what they did. So
it's true.
Yeah. But no, I barely remember like anything about Kroll other than that flying star thing that he threw. That was
the glaive. It was the glaive.
Oh,
yeah,
thank
you. You're correct. That's yet it looks nothing like a glaive.
Exactly. I know. Yep. No, this was to me the coolest thing about this movie was the glaive, which I actually statted up for my D&D games back then, and nice. the offshoot video game that was in the arcades was a pretty cool game.
There was a video game for Kroll, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, a coin-op game in the arcades. Yep.
I've probably played it. I don't remember, but I'm sure I must have played it.
It was just, the movie was, I don't know, I wanted to like it more than I did, I guess. I don't know, because it had the cool mix of sci-fi and fantasy, because, the evil robot dude shot lasers, but then the heroes were all like D&D heroes with swords and stuff.
Nice.
I'm glad.
Fantasy.
Expedition to Barrier Peak action going on there.
Yes, exactly.
I'm glad you were able to remember, something, so it wasn't just oh yeah, we don't remember anything about this. Pick something else.
I'll have to dig out my old spiral notebook with my stats, because I have, the glaive and some of the stuff from the other movies we talked about. I statted up Dar and movies we haven't talked about yet. I don't want to spoil anything, but I know where we're going in the third round.
I'd love to hear what you got.
I'll have to dig that stuff up. Go back to the archives.
The archives.
Well, the old D&D heads always save their character sheets somewhere.
Oh yes. Yep.
Oh, that reminds me. Did you share with the Nerdarchy guys our field trip, Tim?
No, I didn't. The first podcast I did with Dave, it was actually a road trip. We went out to a place in Rockford, Illinois, which is just south, close to the Wisconsin border, called Toad Hall. And it's this place of used media. There's everything: records, tapes, books, comics. It's just an insane amount of stuff crammed into this 2-story building with a basement. And they had a gaming section, which I was interested in, of course. And they had the coolest thing that I saw there was a Holmes box of basic D&D.
Okay.
And so we sat down at this table to talk about a few items that we pulled off the shelves with the store owner. And, of course, I forget if Dave did it or if I did it, but one of us pulled down that D&D box. And as we started talking, the store owner was like, oh, funny story about D&D. This table we're sitting at and these chairs we're sitting on, these were actually used by some of the earliest play testers of D&D. I was like, what are you talking about? Because D&D is from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We're in Rockford. What are you talking about? But yeah, and I haven't finished doing the research yet, but I've talked with enough people at GaryCon, which is in March every year in Lake Geneva, that there was a Rockford contingent of those old guard guys from the early 70s. And so there's pretty sure the guy's telling the truth when he says that stuff actually dates back to that era and was, so we were sitting at the table where some of the original play testers sat at. I thought that was pretty cool.
So you played or talked at the table where D&D came alive.
Yeah, we talked. We didn't play, but what we did was we were just running around the store grabbing just anything 80s related. So there was an 8-track of Rick Springfield, that we were talking about, or the WWF wrestling rock and roll album, that had like.
Hey, we're from Jersey, right?
No, I did not. So yeah, we were just like geeking out, just anything that we could find that was like, iconic 80s, and they had tons of it, and
Wow.
and yeah, Tim was geeking out about all the D&D stuff that they had there. It was awesome.
Sounds like fun, like a fun trip. I'm down.
You gotta invest some time though, because there's a lot of it's like digging for gold, because you just go through each of the different bins and shelves, and nothing's in alphabetical order. It's cool. Yeah.
Another thing to add to the Nerdarchy World Tour.
So do we want to start round 3?
We're on round 3, and I guess I'm back up. So I gotta say, greetings, Starfighter. You've been recruited by the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada.
Yeah, I saw that one in the movie theater.
Yes, Last Starfighter.
I adored that movie. I remember watching that, and I remember I can not clearly, but I can vaguely recall like the final scene with him shooting everything around him, and it's glorious.
I remember the kid sitting in the cockpit, and I remember the ship spinning in circles, firing everything. That's about it. Oh, and the trainer, right? His trainer was like a weird alien guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forget what they called it. It was like the Death Blast or something like that, or Death Star
Was it Death
or something.
Blossom?
Death Blossom.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. And so he hit it, and then all of a sudden he spun the chair around, and the bullets went, or the lasers went all over the place. It was fantastic. But that was like one of the first movies that actually had like a very valid attempt of trying to blend that CGI space elements into it.
So, do you think that movie inspired Ender's Game?
Ooh, great question.
It had to have.
It definitely had. Yeah, it definitely has a lot of great elements of that. I could see it.
They recruited the Starfighters from a video game,
right?
And Ender's Game is really them playing a game as their training, without giving out any spoilers, if you guys care about that.
Well, usually when we're talking about 80s movies, and then like somebody will say spoiler alert, I'm like, okay, it's a movie from the 80s. Let's not worry about spoilers. And
well, I was thinking Ender's Game. That's a little more recent.
Well, if you read the book, though, you understood the concept, but yeah, nonetheless, I know what you're saying, though. It reversed that concept, and I can see it. I can see how that could have influenced.
So I would say it definitely took inspiration from or was influenced by.
Yeah,
that would be my recommendation on that.
I'm going to go with Last Starfighter got straight up carjacked.
So who's that said that the maneuver was the Death Blossom? Did you just know that, or did you Google that?
Oh no, it came to me. Like a dark vision.
Wow. Is that accurate?
I don't remember.
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
It sounds right.
He said it.
Yeah, like when he said Death Star, I'm like, well, I know they didn't rip that off of Star Wars, but it's definitely something like that. So when Dave said Death Blossom, I'm like, yeah, that sounds really, really on point.
He said it with such confidence, I just took it as fact.
Yeah. I just Googled it, and he's right. Death Blossom.
Woohoo!
Wow,
That's confirmed.
That's impressive.
If we only had a way to figure this out. As we swipe over the interwebs.
Yeah, I would hit the button, but I actually, when I Googled Starfighter Death Blossom, you actually get a YouTube video. So if I would hit that now, but I don't want to ruin our recording here, so. But I'm dying to hit play on this, just to watch it again.
Push the shiny red button.
Ooh, so pretty, my precious. Anyway, so Last Starfighter, that was my last pick. So now we're going to go to Nerdarchy Dave.
No, Tim.
No, you're two.
No, you're second up.
You guys are totally screwing up the order. I'm pretty sure Tim was number 2 and I'm number 3. But
that's what you were. That's what you were. But then Tim rolled for the first round.
All right. So
1, 3, 2, 4.
I'm holding my action.
Oh, right. So I'm really torn here, man, because there's some really good ones. You know, like I said, I did pull out the whole Arnold Schwarzenegger list, but
Labyrinth is another fantastic one where they went and like, all right, we need to add some music to this, and they got David Bowie singing and Jennifer Connelly running and all kinds of fantastic moments in that movie.
I mean, there's so much about that movie to love, and it's one of those movies that holds up too. Like I can watch that movie with my kids that are 12 and 16, and they want to watch it. So I think that speaks a lot. This generation, it's hard to get them to watch these older movies, but they delve right into that. And again, Jim Henson is a freaking mastermind. Don't die, Ted. Is a mastermind with the puppetry, and David Bowie does an amazing job as the Goblin King Jareth. And the imagery in the movie that throughout the whole entire movie is I don't know. There's nothing to compare that movie to, in my opinion.
Oh, it's definitely unique, and it is cool that is Bowie doing it. I mean, I know he'd acted in other things, but he just wasn't some rock star who wanted to make a movie, and so they made a movie for him. I mean, he is the Goblin King. I mean, it's pretty iconic. Just the image. As soon as you say Labyrinth, you get that picture in your head of him with the crazy wig, and it's just
and honestly
enduring.
And honestly, when you look at that, you see that character. And that's one of the things that I love about actors who fully transform into their role. Like you don't see, it's just a guy in a wig. He acts, he moves as that character. And even the scenes with him playing around with the ball, stand out in your mind. And it's like, okay, here's a being of immense power and all this other jazz. And I'm like, all right, I can get behind this. I can see this as is villain even the correct word there? I mean,
I threatened my brother with the Goblin King for years after that movie. I literally terrorized him.
No, I'm with you, Ted. Though with the point that you made with you have the actors that just get themselves immersed into a character, and you forget they're the actor portraying this character, and they become the character. And I see that a lot, like in Tom Hanks movies. He's just so great, and in this case, he ceased to be David Bowie. And he was so awesome and believable.
In this instance, I can explain it for you, right? Here's what happened. David Bowie did a lot of drugs, and at that point in time, he probably didn't know that he wasn't the Goblin King.
Good point.
That's how I normally dress.
It wasn't very far off from his Ziggy Stardust persona. Come on.
Right.
Well, this is true. All right, so we are on Tim.
So I have so many to choose. I always get to the last pick, and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to go with Time Bandits from 1981 because it's so crazy. It's not quite a Monty Python movie, but almost, because there's a couple of the guys, John Cleese, Michael Palin, and of course Terry Gilliam directed it. But I like how it's got the different scenes set through different parts of history. I love the idea of the dwarves stealing the map from the creator, and it inspired me. I always wanted to have a D&D group made of all dwarves, named Randall, Fidget, Strutter, Og, Wally, and Vermin. Those are just awesome names for those guys. And Kenny Baker, Star Wars shout out. Kenny Baker was Fidget. Oh. Sean Connery is King Agamemnon. There's a Minotaur in it. I mean, come on.
The dwarves falling from the sky and landing on the Minotaur so you get killed. It's another movie I saw in the movie theaters. We actually got to the movie late, so we had to stay until it started again so we could catch the beginning. and that scene in the closet,
Oh.
in the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, with the knights come bursting out of the kid's wardrobe or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. The giant
I thought it was
with,
cool.
with the hat it was just actually the ship they're on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was so many neat little bits in that movie, and I love how it all tied back to the toys that were in his room, scattered all over the floor too. The final battle with the evil one, and that was something else I statted up for D&D was the evil one's minions. They were like those, I don't know, like 8 foot tall guys with like cattle skulls for heads. I don't know. Those left a mark on me. I had to create stats for them and use them in the game.
I totally get that.
Well, all I gotta say is thank you very, 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 very much for picking one of my honorable mentions. But yeah, I love Time Bandits, and even Napoleon. Bring back the little people. It was fantastic. It was great.
Jolly good.
And don't touch that. That's evil.
Yeah, Mom, Dad. Yeah, and how grim is that? I mean, the kid's parents just explode at the end of the movie, and that's it. The end.
Credits. That's the way to end a movie in the 80s right there. So then we are with Ted at the end.
All right, so I'm going to pick another one that has a breadth of history that starts off in the 80s. It's got movies, it's got TV shows, and that is Highlander.
Okay.
There can be only one.
Indeed, Christopher Lambert. Awesome movie. I actually got introduced to this one through the sequel, so I was very confused when I actually went back and watched the original. And
you're like, this one is so good. Why was the other one so bad? I don't get it.
But and that's the iteration that everybody has, is the quickening is so horrible, and yet that's what I was introduced to, and that spawned me to watch more. And again, I've watched all of the movies. I've watched all of the TV show with I can't even remember what the other actor's name is. But it's great stuff, and the legend of what that all is grew off of that initial movie. So
cult classic, absolutely.
Indeed.
No, that scene, I remember reading recently that scene in the church with the Kurgan, and I'm trying to remember what, I don't know, he improvised some stuff, or they maybe didn't divulge fully what they were intending to do when they shot, because they shot in a real church, and the thing was just so evil. That's the guy, I forget the actor's name, but the Kurgan character, and just the whole story behind that was just a cool idea. And then it was just awesome to have Sean Connery, Scotsman, playing a Spaniard and not even caring to
to change his accent.
Yeah.
And what a great name too, Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez.
So did you remember that, or did you look that up?
No, I have IMDb open up in front of me, but it's like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, that's the name. And then that the flowery outfit he wore, fantastic, great stuff.
It was such a great villain in that movie, the Kurgan. He was so vile, and especially in the that church scene that you mentioned. Basically when he tells him what he actually did when he killed Sean Connery's character, and just how he was just the ultimate prick.
Yeah.
So as we talk about these different movies, so many more coming to mind, and I'm like, man, no one picked Blade Runner.
Yeah, that's another good one.
When you think of cult classics.
So we also didn't go. I mean, I guess we're jumping into our honorable mentions at this point in time.
Yeah, please go ahead, bring some up.
When no one really went into the animated field of things, so I also had the Transformers movie on my list, and that one, not only was it great, we got to see Optimus Prime die and have so many kids horrified and scarred as children.
Very traumatic.
To see that. But it also had a great soundtrack and so many phenomenal voice actors that we've seen elsewhere. So it was cool.
Dude, I have this soundtrack on CD, and I have it autographed by the guitar player from the band Energy, the ones that sang Instruments of Destruction.
Oh, nice.
Well, I was thinking animation, too, because one of mine that I was debating with heavy metal.
Oh, yeah.
That. You talk about soundtrack, too, but that was another, 1981 R-rated animated movie, and, another HBO special. Lots of boobs in that one, even though they're cartoon boobs, but, still, when you're that age, you take what you
boobs
can get,
boobs.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. But the Lochnar, the evil green thing that spans time and space, and just at the end, the Terrakian warrior with her bird, there was a lot of cool D&D stuff in there. A lot of cool just sci-fi stuff. And right, I mean, it has to be that the Fifth Element was inspired by the Harry Canyon sequence in that movie, right? It has to be, right? I mean, I've never read that, but it just, I don't know how it couldn't be that way.
I just remember the aliens doing all that blow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had Terminator, Red Sonja, Predator, Running Man. Like I said, I was like, that was the golden age for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had so many other great movies too that weren't sci-fi and fantasy.
It's because he just didn't stop working then. He would go from set to set.
Yeah, Schwarzenegger was all over the place. It was great.
Well, yeah, when you look at some of the movies he were in, there's a few of them that happened in the same year. Like Predator and Running Man, as well as Conan the Destroyer and Terminator. Prolific.
I wonder how that worked. If you were like in a movie production studio or whatever, you'd be like, well, just give it to Arnold. He'll do anything.
Yeah. Hey, we're filming a movie on this next lot over. Are you doing anything on your lunch break?
Well, it's
80's.
Stallone or Schwarzenegger. We'll give it to one of them. One of those two guys will do it. All right. So it's all good.
It's funny. Yeah, those two definitely were the big. Well, then a little bit of Jean-Claude Van Damme too, but it was definitely Arnold and Sylvester Stallone. But I wonder if I never heard stories. Were there any movies that like they were both up for that one got and the other didn't, or were the things always just written as vehicles for that one guy? You know what I mean?
I don't know. It's hard to say because Stallone's two biggest franchises, he was he wrote them. So
right.
Yeah.
Like other things, like say like Cobra or some goofy Stallone movie. I don't know if he wrote that, but I mean anybody could have been in that, right?
Yeah, like Cobra and Raw Deal and Commando.
Commando.
When they were thinking Rhinestone,
come on,
they were like, "This has got to be Stallone." I don't know if you guys remember that one or not, but that was a Dolly Parton one that he actually sung in. Anyway, never mind.
Oh no.
Well, again, we're in a different age of technology with the internet. So much more information is out there and easily gotten on a daily basis. Whereas back then, okay, was this something that people felt, is this worth reporting to take up, a news article, or is this just stories that might come out later that you'd have to investigate on? So it's really weird. I've never felt the need to research, either of those actors in that kind of capacity.
Right.
Certain somebody has.
All right. So you guys got any other honorable mentions?
Well, I want to mention The Sword and the Sorcerer. I know we briefly hit on it before, and that was another one I was maybe going to have one of my main picks just because, it doesn't hold up at all. I watched that again recently too, and for as much as I loved that as a kid, it's the thing about it is when you compare like the first Conan movie to Sword and Sorcerer or even Beastmaster, is they chinsed out so bad on the weapons in the Sword and Sorcerer. They look like they're made out of spray painted wood. I mean, they look so fake compared to the craftsmanship and everything that was like put into Conan's father's sword, But even with that, the Sword and the Sorcerer plays like a D&D module. It's and I statted up the Sly Sword and Zusha the Sorcerer and all that stuff, Talon the Hero, all that stuff, because I love that movie with all the hidden weapons he had on him. And it was cool because actually that was one of the ones where when it showed on regular TV later, they had filmed alternate scenes. Like in the theatrical release, he gets crucified. So they actually, he's stuck up to the boards with nails through his hands. It's a little gory, but when it showed on TV, his hands were tied to the crucifix, not bolted, right? And then some of the nudity was covered up, some of the blood was changed. So they actually filmed alternate versions of it. I thought that was kind of a neat little footnote to the whole thing. But that sword, the 3-bladed sword, was just so over the top and ridiculous and awesome.
It's iconic, absolutely. Excalibur, was that in the 80s? Or was that late?
81.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was that 80s or late 70s? I wasn't really sure, but that was another great one too. My first glimpse of John Luke.
Oh, who?
It's,
John Luke.
Helen.
Man.
Talking about Patrick Stewart.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Is Jean Luke, not John Luke?
I said John Luke.
And
my
Helen
Jersey
Mirren
accent.
is Morgana. Yeah.
For me, I can't end this without actually bringing up Lady Hawk. No, dead silence. Wow. Okay.
Just wanted to give you a hand. It's always fun.
I only vaguely remember the movie. It's like the curse, right? During either night or day, she gets turned into the hawk.
Yeah, during the I'm going to reverse him, I'm sure.
During
But
the day, she's a hawk, and during the night, he's a wolf.
there you go. And the great Matthew Broderick, Ferris Bueller himself.
I don't even recall that movie.
It's another one that really chalks up to cheesy 80s. He's basically he's a thief, and this everyone around him is just uber tough. Even Lady Hawk herself is tougher than he is, but somehow they pull it all together and get their mission accomplished. And there's a magical element to it, which is kind of cool. So it's a fun watch, but cheesy.
Well, doesn't that kind of define the 80s anyway?
Oh yeah,
It's
Fun to watch, but cheesy.
Yes. That's the world I live in here.
We got to throw out Clash of the Titans too, the original.
Yes.
We're throwing it out because it's that bad, right? Is that what you mean?
No, that movie was amazing when I watched it when I was a kid. Oh, you're talking about. If you want to throw out the new one, if you're going to throw anything out.
The skeleton fight, the inexplicably two-headed Cerberus, when he's normally three-headed in mythology.
Not forget the scorpions. When the scorpions come out of the head, that's awesome. When he stabs the bag with the head in it. Yeah,
and the blood that looks like Cholula hot sauce or something. I don't know.
That Perseus. That was a good one. Perseus, your sword, and they get stabbed to death. That was a great movie when I was a kid.
Yeah, and that's the point. When you were a kid, it does not hold up, unfortunately.
That's your fault for going back and watching them. My way is the best, I tell you.
Just fond memories of it and let it go. There you go.
That's it.
That makes a lot of sense because I've been revisiting things and I was like, I don't know, why did I like this back then? But
and using that logic, Megatron was an intelligent military genius. Done.
He was until he got replaced by Galvatron, which was more amazing.
Oh my God! The battle is not going our way. Run! And that sums up Transformers.
Yes, but we know Cobra Commander was a very great military leader.
Oh, he rivaled Megatron.
Good times. All right, so last chance, honorable mentions.
Went through my list.
Mine as well.
Tim?
I could go on for another hour, but I know we got to cut it.
Yeah, we are running long, man. But this is a great conversation, so it makes sense to run long. Usually what we do is we'll end this thing where we give our social media credentials, and since you gentlemen from Nerdarchy probably have quite a few things going on. I know you got your YouTube channel, but if you want to give our listeners your shout outs to your social medias, if you want to start, Dave.
Sure, pretty much Nerdarchy on anything. If it's social media, type in Nerdarchy, we'll come up. We also have nerdarchy.com as well.
Okay. All right.
The website nerdarchy.com has a whole bunch of articles related to pretty much anything nerdy. It's not just specific to tabletop role playing games. As Dave says, we have the YouTube channel, Facebook page. If you type in Nerdarchy, you'll find us.
Oh, and since this is an audio medium, so Nerdarchy is nerd with archy on the end of it. So Nerdarchy, Nerdarchy.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. You want to make sure everybody understands that one, to spell it right. Otherwise, you're not going to find them. So, but you guys are on Twitter too, right?
We are.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. We're pretty much everywhere.
So, who maintains all that? Do you guys split those duties up, or do you?
There's four of us.
Yeah.
Dave handles Facebook. Ryan pretty much handles the other ones. We were for a while on Reddit, and Nate the Nerdarch was responsible for that. That kind of became a lot of work, and we just kind of have left that up to the fans at this point in time.
And there's some media where we just kind of broadcast our stuff too as well, for people to find it. Like Tumblr, Twitter. We're not as active on Twitter, but we are there, and we interact with people when they interact with us. Ryan maintains the Instagram, and he's over there a lot. I'm very active on Facebook and YouTube. And obviously, YouTube is where you can find all our videos. And then we've got, I don't even know how many writers we have writing over on nerdarchy.com anymore.
I believe we're around 8 at this current juncture.
Nice.
That's 8 authors that are not one of the 4 Nerdarchy people.
Yes.
All right. Well, it sounds like you guys are taking over, the world, so that's all good.
That's the plan.
Yeah, it's quite the empire.
So, Mr. Timothy, you're on Twitter.
Yes, I'm just at TSW512 on Twitter, or you can find me on Facebook through the podcast, 80's Reboot Overdrive and 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse.
Very cool. So I'm Dave. Take care of our 80's Reboot accounts. That's Twitter at 80's Reboot, 80sreboot.tumblr.com, facebook.com/80sreboot. You can email us 80sreboot@gmail.com, and we also have a blog, and that's southgatemediagroup.com/80sreboot blog. We appreciate you reliving the 80s with us, and we are so thankful that our new Nerdarchy friends visited us. So have a good night.
Good night, folks. Stay nerdy.
Have a good one. Stay nerdy.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80's Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80's Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80's Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.